Happy Thursday. Here we are, about to go back into the sunlit lands. Hey, have you ever gone into a place that you weren't supposed to? Someone else's place, like, have you ever trespassed? Maybe not trespassed, but even gone into a room you weren't supposed to be in, dug through someone's stuff when you weren't supposed to. When I was in college, there was a new building being built. I think the statute of limitations must be done by now. But when I was in college, there was a new building being built on our campus, and all the kids from my hall, we all went down there in the middle of the night, and we went to this building, and there was no way in. There weren't doors that were accessible or anything, but we found this one window that had been cut into the building. It was about this big. Oh, you can't even see. I can't quite fit it. This big. And some of the little smaller folks in our dorm were able to easily squeeze in there. And then some of the larger folks like myself were able to very difficultly squeeze in there. And it was like 4 stories. So we are like running around in the dark, terrifying each other, terrifying ourselves. Because we knew if we got caught, we'd be in trouble. And it's a terrible feeling. I don't know if you've ever been doing something and knew that if you got caught, you were going to be in trouble, and it like scared you the whole time, even though there was nothing actually frightening other than that happening. Could be. Well, I see people are starting to sound off. The Sims are here. Happy Thursday. Happy Thursday to you. It is a lovely day today. There's Joanna. She says, hello, smiley face. Hello, smiley face to you. Welcome. Glad you're here. I don't know if you have big plans for the weekends, but I do know tomorrow, Grace Reeves says, we are back. Hello, Grace. Hi, Reeves. Don't forget tomorrow that my friend Morgan Bussey is going to be joining us. Morgan is the author, as you already know. Do you already know? She is the author of the Ravenwood Saga. So she'll be with us tomorrow at our regular time. And then let's see, who else is here? Patrick is here. Hi, Patrick. Dr. Awesome is here. And Milena says, hi there, I'll watch it tonight, not home today. Wait a minute. How are you commenting now then, I wonder? Good. I'm glad you'll watch it tonight. That's great. Great. Well, as I'm reading today, let me know if there's a time when you've been sneaking around doing something you're not supposed to, unless you're Grace Reeve and you're watching this with your parents and you're like, I know I'm not allowed to say that one time I snuck into that one place. We know all about it, Grace. It's okay. You can share it with your parents. I'm just joking, obviously. What has happened in our story so far that you need to know if you're new with us today is that Madeline Oliver and Jason Wu are 2 friends on Earth, just ordinary buddies who get transported to a magical world called the Sunlit Lands. Madeline Oliver has a terminal illness that prevents her from being able to breathe, and a magical being named Hanali from a group of people called the Elenil comes and says, if you come and fight for us for a human year against these horrible monsters called the Skim, then we will heal you completely. So of course she goes, and Jason goes with her. Over the course of a variety of adventures, they've come to a place where they've kind of angered the most powerful person in the Sunlit Lands, a guy named the Archon Thenity. And Thenity has just met with Madeline and with Jason and threatened them and let them know that he's watching them and that he has plans for them, and also has implied that the person they're staying with, the Knight of the Mirror, may not have their best intentions at heart, which they're skeptical of. But he says to them, the Skim, those evil bad guys, have been saying they're only fighting us because they're trying to get a hold of these magical artifacts. He lists a bunch of them. Could it be that the Knight already handed them over, and that's why they're not fighting us anymore? And they said, no, that can't be. But they're also filled with doubt. And then don't forget also, of course, Madeline's roommate in the Sunlit Lands is Shula Bishara, a friend from the Middle East originally, who now lives in the Sunlight Lands with her friends. And she's a great warrior who was kidnapped by the Skim for a short time, but has been brought back and healed of her wounds. And now they're together in the castle called Westwind. And that's where we pick up at the beginning of chapter 22, called The Night Solar. A solar, by the way, in a castle is the room at the very top of a tower. It was often a bedchamber for the most influential people. That's why princesses will always be at the top of a tower, right? In fairy tales, that they lived in the solar. I don't know. To me, it's safe, right? Which is why people are put there. But it also takes a long time to climb all those stairs, and there's no air conditioning. They were often open, by the way, which is interesting, at the top to fresh air, so that, they didn't have glass necessarily for the windows, things like that. So it was open, so you'd have fresh air. You were far from the stench of the castle and the village within the castle, things like that. And birds, a lot of people kept birds so they could send messages from their solar, which is kind of cool. And it's a great place for watching the stars, I'm sure. And you could always light a fire, right? It doesn't have to be cold. Anyway, The Night Solar, chapter 22. Patrick wants to know, if there's a solar in a castle, is there a lunar? Good question. Maybe there's a... And then Grace says, I'm pretty sure any sneaking in anywhere was led by you and Joy, which is her sister, and she's basically my sister too. Grace is like my sister. Joy and I are 1 month apart. Joy I met literally within my first week of birth. She is legitimately my oldest friend, and Grace is correct. We were often the ringleaders if there was trouble. Not that we would have taken the blame, but we deserved it. Okay, chapter 22, The Night Solar. Where is the fountain which brought joy to the city, clean and clear at its heart, from the deserted city a cockery lament? Madeline felt thrown off her rhythm. The confrontation with the Archon went against everything she had expected. She wouldn't be waiting around anymore, waiting to see what other people told her to do. It was time for action. Her legs had nearly given out by the time they reached the bottom of the stairs. They found Hanali leaning against an elaborate marble handrail and watching the unicorns munching grass in the garden below. They started to tell Hanali what had happened, but he shushed them. He smiled broadly, chatting amiably all the way back to the knight's castle. When they crossed the threshold of Westwind, he whispered, "Do not speak negatively of him. Not in this city. And certainly not where magic is in use. Do you think he cannot hear?" He whisked them into the great hall and called for the knight. The two of them listened with furrowed brows as Madeline and Jason told their story. The end result was not, as Madeline had hoped, a promise to keep them away from the Archon. Instead, the knight and their benefactor debated which activities were safe for them in the city. They are not to leave the city limits, that much is plain, the knight said. Hanali sniffed. They've been watched carefully since arriving, just like any of the new arrivals. The one exception was allowing them on the battlefield. Even then, I watched Jason from the wall, and Galenia accompanied Madeline. You are not to leave this castle during the festival of the turning, with or without accompaniment, the knight said. Madeline objected that she didn't know what or when that was, although she did remember the Archon mentioning it. Jason objected that a festival sounded like a party, and it hardly seemed fair to be locked away in a castle. Not a nice Disney castle either, he said. No offense. Furious about the whole thing, Madeline stormed off to her solar, which being at the top of one of Westwind's towers was a long hike, especially after descending hundreds of flights of stairs at the palace. She had run out of anger by the time she made it to her room. She collapsed on her bed. A half hour later, a sheepish knock woke her. She opened the door to find Jason, a goofy smile on his face, a loaf of slightly burned brown bread under his arm, and a cutting board covered with a thick, salty cheese. Shula stood beside him, holding an enormous bowl of a red, juicy citrus fruit called Burst. Jason had named it, of course, and failed to remember the common name. When placed on the tongue, the skin of the fruit nearly exploded, and the flavor was both tongue-numbingly tart and chocolatey sweet at the same time. Madeline and Shula tucked their feet up on the bed, and Jason pulled a large chair over, and they descended on the food. Halfway through her second slice of brown bread, Madeline began to feel human again. Partway through her third, she laid back on her bed, one hand under her head, the other on her full belly. "I'm beginning to wonder," she said, "if the Elenil are the bad guys here. Something is seriously wrong with the Archon, and it doesn't seem like a huge request by the Skim to have their artifacts returned to them." Shula popped some cheese in her mouth. "Artifacts returned, and you and Jason turned over," she said. Jason added, "Killed, I think, not just handed over. Breakbones was very clear about Madeline's, quote, lifeless body." "Whose fault is that?" Madeline asked, throwing a crust of bread at him. "I said I was sorry," Jason protested. "He asked me your name. He didn't say I'm going to murder someone. Let's brainstorm." "The Skim are monsters," Shula said. "The Elenil have their faults, yes. But who threatened to murder you?" "The Skim." Jason, his mouth full of food, said, "Breakbone said he wanted to usher in centuries of darkness. I can't even remember how many he said. 5, I think." "Maybe you shouldn't have let him go then," Madeline said. "Who kidnapped me?" Shula asked. "Who held me prisoner in the wastelands? They gave me rotten meat and filthy water. They left me in public so they could throw garbage at me when they walked by. They beat me trying to get answers about you two and trying to get me to tell them where their artifacts are." She paused, the muscles in her jaw flexing. "I don't even know what happened to Diego." That was the boy who could fly. He had escaped the Skim but hadn't returned to far seeing. The night couldn't find him. Madeline put a hand on Shula's knee. "I'm sorry, Shula." "I don't see how the Skim can be the good guys," Shula said. "On the other hand," Jason said, "Breakbones wasn't in a day spa. He was chained in a dungeon. So the way the Elenil treat their prisoners, well, it isn't much different." Madeline crossed to the small, arched window in her solar, which looked out toward the city wall. "The city is so beautiful, though. The singing fountains, the palace gardens, even the marketplaces are colorful and well organized. The Elenil creates such beautiful things. The palace is amazing." "It is beautiful," Shula said. "It was the Skim who hurt me, and the Elenil who used their magic to heal me. You too, Jason. The Elenil are bright, beautiful people. They don't live in squalor and make speeches about destroying the light." At the mention of Jason's healing, Madeline stiffened and looked straight at him. He stared back, one eyebrow raised. He knew something was wrong, but hadn't asked her directly, not yet. "The magic," Jason said, "works in an interesting way. If I want to use a sword, I have to take those skills from someone else who earned them. When I have those skills, someone else doesn't. Or Shula, when Madeline healed you, that Skim woman had to take your wounds. Which naturally brings up the question, if I was nearly dead when I was healed by the Elenil—" "Wait," Madeline said, interrupting him. She wasn't ready for this conversation. She couldn't talk about it, not right now. And she couldn't bear the thought of what Jason would say when she told him that Night's Breath had died so he could live, and that neither Jason nor Night's Breath had any choice in the matter. "Shula, what is the Festival of the Turning like?" "Oh, I've only been to it once," Shula said. "One more than us," Jason said. Then, his voice bitter, "The Knight doesn't want us to go. He says it isn't safe." "He's right," Shula said. "Did he tell you why?" Madeline shook her head. "He's not the most talkative." Shula scraped the scraps of cheese from the cutting board out the window into the moat below. "For one day, all the magic of the Court of Farseeing is reversed. It's an entire day without Elenil magic. The Crescent Stone must rest for a day, and all the magic that runs through it must cease. The people of the Sunlit Lands celebrate the day in different ways. They go to their own territories and tell the story of the coming of magic to the Sunlit Lands and how the Majestic One, a magician from centuries ago, made the place. Rich people wear rags, and poor people dress in fine clothing. It's a time of reversals. and people play act that they are something other than what they are. The highest society people take pride in appearing to be impoverished because it announces their high status at other times. I don't see how it puts us in danger, Madeline said, making room for Shula to lean on the windowsill. The skim will be in their home territory. Who's going to harm us? Well, there'll still be skim here. If one of them hurt you, there'd be no healing magic available. You never told me what your deal with the Elenil is, but you'll lose that for the day, too. I won't be able to light myself on fire in battle. Jason said, Madeline can't breathe by herself. She's got a terminal illness. So she won't be able to breathe? Jason, Madeline shouted. It wasn't right for him to share that. It was hers to share, or not. People looked at her differently when they knew it. It happened 100 times with her friends. Her disease wasn't contagious, but people acted as if it were. They made suggestions about how she could take care of herself, even though she was healthier than most. Or they gave her pitying looks as if they were healthy because they were better than her. But Shula acted as if she had just learned Madeline had asked for a haircut. She didn't make a big deal out of it or look at Madeline with pity. She only rubbed the long scar on her face and said, that's right. Once the ceremony starts, all magic starts to fail. We could go to the palace for the beginning, but once night falls, she won't be able to breathe. Night falls? Of course. Once a year, the Elenil experience true night, see the stars. It's their magic that keeps far-seeing in perpetual day. When the sun sets, magic starts to fail. It takes a while. Some magic fails faster than others, but before the night is over, you won't be able to breathe. I won't be able to light on fire. I won't get pudding for breakfast, Jason said, but his jovial tone of voice rang hollow, and he looked nervous. That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard, Shula said. Was that your deal? Pudding every morning? Jason acted offended. Every morning for the rest of my life? Except festival days, apparently. He deflated a little. How about you, Shula? You just got healed a few days ago. Will that be undone? Yes, Shula said, though my skim counterpart will have healed some by then, so I'll only get a portion of that damage back, and only for the day. Madeline beat Jason to his question. What if someone was almost dead and healed? Shula shrugged. It depends. If the counterpart died from the wounds, the transfer is sealed. It's permanent. Someone like that would remain healthy. If the counterpart has been recovering, they would get the wounds back for the day. Jason held Madeline's gaze. She could tell what he was thinking. On the festival of the turning, he would know what had happened to Night's Breath. Madeline wouldn't be able to avoid the conversation any longer. She tried to hold his gaze, but she couldn't. He must suspect, because why would she be avoiding the conversation if all was well? A pang struck her like a knife in her ribs. The thought that Night's Breath was gone, dead, because of her, had been keeping her awake, watching the light on the ceiling of her chambers. That decision kept Jason alive, she reminded herself. That ridiculous, overly truthful, loyal, infuriating guy who had gone from chemistry partner to good friend mostly on the strength of picking her up when she had fainted and driving her to the hospital. That had to count for something. The Archon's accusations against the knight lingered in her mind. What if he wanted to keep them in the castle so he could trade them away to the Skim? If he had already given the Skim the artifacts, maybe she and Jason were next. She didn't think the knight would do such a thing, but no one had seen the artifacts in some time, according to the Archon. We have to search West Wind, she said. We have to find the Skim artifacts. It might help us figure out what's going on. I don't even know what they are, Shula said. It's not a topic the Elenil share about freely. The Archon mentioned some of them to us. There was a sword called the Sword of Years, I think. A robe called, what was it, Jason? The Robe of Ascension? Yeah, Jason said. Plus something called the Socks of Silence. Lets you sneak around all sneaky-like. I don't know. I can't remember. Madeline ignored him. There was a mask, I think. Jason jumped out of his seat. Ah! That kid with the bark mask was so creepy. Calm down. That was before we even got into the Sunlit Lands. Shula paced the room. Could we just ask the knight to show them to us? No way, Jason said. That's crazy. Let's tromp all over his home, opening locked doors, and hope he doesn't notice. If he's secretly working with the skim, we don't want to tip him off that we know, Madeline said. Shula, still looking out the window, said, he left earlier, going toward the palace. He never tells us what his business is day to day, but he'll be gone at least an hour or two. So where do we start? Madeline had been thinking about this ever since Thenity had suggested the knight might have done away with the artifacts. If the artifacts were well hidden, that might make them as impossible to find as if he had already given them to the skim. The only way to prove his innocence was to find the actual artifacts, all of them. Not that she needed to prove his innocence, but she needed to know if she and Jason were safe. Is there an armory? She asked. Yes, Shula said thoughtfully. I've been in there, though, not much to see. Nothing in the stables, Jason said in a tone of voice that suggested he honestly believed this to be a helpful data point. Or the kitchen. The knight's solar? She thought it strange that in a castle a private room was called a solar, but she wanted to use the correct terms. It would make sense for the artifacts to be somewhere near where the knight sleeps, Shula said. If someone broke in, he'd want to be nearby. We could ask Ruth, Jason said. She knows an awful lot for a kid. She's loyal to the knight, Shula said. He's like a father to her. Did that mean the three of them were disloyal? Madeline didn't like to think that. She wanted to think they were protecting themselves, doing what was best for them and the Elenil, checking in on the knight to make sure he was keeping those skim artifacts safe. We'll start at his solar, Madeline said. We can work our way down the tower from there. If they're not in his tower, we regroup and try again. Jason tucked the cutting board under his arm. You know I'll tell the knight everything if he asks me. Shula winced. Jason also has a bad habit of volunteering information he doesn't even need to. It's part of my charm, Jason said, batting his eyelashes at Shula. Well, said Shula slyly, Madeline, why don't you and I go look in the solar to see if the knight is there? We can chat with him and ask if it would be okay for you to go to the Festival of Turning if I go with you. We can take care of all this artifact business later. Madeline frowned. But he's... It dawned on her what Shula was doing. Right. Jason could stand at the bottom of the stairs and shout up if he finds the knight. If the knight asks what we're doing up there, we'll say we were looking for him. You already know he left for the day, Jason said. This isn't a loophole that will work. I know you're lying to me right now. Are we? Shula asked, and she poked him in the nose with her index finger. Bring your cutting board and let's go. A quick stop in the kitchen, and then they cut across the great hall toward the knight's tower. A huge mirror was fastened to the wall at the entrance of the stone stairway. Stay here, Madeline told Jason. If someone comes, shout up to us. You mean if the knight comes, Jason said. Anyone who comes might know where he is, and we're just looking for him, so go ahead and shout up the stairs, Shula said. Jason slumped against the wall. Uh-huh. A thick wooden door with iron bands blocked the entrance, but it swung open at a light touch. On the other side, Madeline noticed a beam of wood which could be placed in an iron bracket to brace the door from the inside. The door being open at all was a good argument. The knight was gone. Unlike the stairs to Madeline's solar, there were no tapestries on the upward climb. There were small gaps in the stone, just wide enough to shoot an arrow from, which let in the pure light of the sunlit lands. Across from each gap, right where the sun would hit them full on, were mirrors. The Knight of the Mirror earned his name, Madeline said. Yeah. Shula paused to look out, an arrow slit. He's a careful man, Madeline. We should be cautious when we enter his room. There may be traps or alarm, even magic. He doesn't allow magic, Madeline said. The artifacts are magic, Shula pointed out. Nothing can be taken from his hand. That's magic, too. They passed a small room that projected out from the tower over the moat, a garderobe, complete with the wooden stool with a hole in it. No magic toilet, though, as I'm sure Jason would say. I don't know about you, but if I was going to cheat on my no magic rule, that's where I would do it. We should still be careful, Shula said. A fair amount of shouting came from downstairs. Madeline couldn't understand what Jason was saying. She leaned toward the stairs and shouted, "What?" His words were garbled, but she heard, quote, "Something in the mirror." Madeline asked Shula if she had caught more than that, but she shook her head. "Probably making a joke," Shula said. "That could be." They studied the closest mirror, seeing only the backward versions of themselves. Madeline shrugged and started up the stairs again. Shula said. "I thought I saw something move in the mirror. Maybe you saw me. Or a bird flying past the window, I guess. Nothing to worry about," Shula said. They continued their climb. Jason shouted something else, and although they couldn't understand his words, his tone of voice seemed calm. They debated turning back, but at this point, turning back didn't mean they wouldn't get caught. There was only one stairway in the tower. It only meant they wouldn't get a chance to check the solar. The stairway rounded the final loop, and the knight's private room stood 10 steps ahead of them. There was no door, which made sense, since there was nothing in the tower other than this room, and the door at the bottom of the stairs could be locked. Shula crouched, climbing the last few steps on her hands and knees, peeking over the top of the landing. Madeline joined her, marveling again at how wonderful it was to be able to breathe. Her heart was pounding, adrenaline pumping, but she could take full, quiet breaths without coughing. She felt energized, alive. The knight's room had open windows in the masonry. Sunlight streamed in. There were no curtains or anything to prevent his room from being essentially in the open, other than the fact that it had a roof with a long overhang that kept the rain out. A bed sat more or less in the center of the room, the sheets twisted, as if they had fought the night to keep him from sleep. A sword leaned against the bed on one side. Between the windows stood full-length mirrors, and a simple table was pushed against the wall, empty. Madeline entered and took in the whole room, turning in a circle. She saw a flash of white in one of the mirrors, maybe caused by the sunlight. She inspected the mirror more closely and saw something strange. "Shula, look at this." The rumpled, unmade bed was not rumpled in the reflection. It was perfectly made, with tight corners. She looked at the table's reflection in the mirror. She put her hand against the glass. There, on the other side, lay the skim artifacts. The end of chapter 22. Chapter 23, which we'll pick up next week, is The Knight's Secrets. Ooh la la. Let's see. My sister says, "I finally broke down and set up a channel so I could comment. Hey, thank you. Welcome. Glad you're here." That's awesome. Love it. All right, my friends, that does it for our Thursday show. Don't forget, Morgan Bussey, author of the Ravenwood Saga, will be with us tomorrow, except I forgot to send her all the sign-in information. So I'm going to do that in just a few minutes. And of course, as always, Tyndale.com is taking orders and sending books right now. So feel free, if you're looking for a copy of the Sunlit Lands books or other Tyndale books like the Dead Sea Squirrels or something else, you can get those at Tyndale.com. My books are also available on Oasis Audio at oasisaudio.com. And of course, don't forget to like, comment, or subscribe this post or this video wherever you're watching. That helps others find the content, and it is helpful for me. Also, what other comments do we have? Oh, Dr. Awesome has a story for us. Good. Some friends and I sneaked into our other friend's place and did every stupid prank we could think of. I remember chucking a block of cream cheese under the bed, but they caught us. One guy got really mad, and another had to drag us off because we were still dumping water on the floor. In retrospect, it was kind of just low-key vandalism. Oh, summer project. Yes, yes. All the good old days. Aren't those the best? I'll tell you one more story before I sign off here. My friends in college one of them was an art major and one was like a art graphic design guy. And to post things on campus, you had to get a stamp saying that it was approved from the school. And our graphic artist friend used his fancy computer to make a fake version of that stamp that he could change at any time to show other dates, whatever. And so we could post whatever we wanted on campus. And we were, at least once, we made these really rough satirical posters that you would never get approved. And he put stamps on them. He'd even put them diagonally and stuff. And we went out late at night and started putting them up around campus. And it was the three of us. So these two guys were roommates and me. And then we got caught by campus police. And me and my buddy, my best friend, we were like, "Oh no, it's fine, man. We got stamps on this. There's no big deal." And the guy's like, "Why are you doing it in the middle of the night then?" And the second roommate, he just cracked. He was like, "Oh man, we're not trying to do anything. We're not trying to get in trouble. We're just," And so the guy was like super, super like obviously thinking we were doing something we shouldn't be, which we were. And we were like, come on, Nate. Let's get out of here. This guy, we're not doing anything wrong. And then we just went back home. But we were like, Nate, you can't even go with us anymore. You were about to tell him that you're the one that made the stamp. He's like, I was about to tell him. Anyway, I don't know what the point is of making a stamp that can evade detection if you're just going to reveal that you're a counterfeiter. Anyway, that's it. I'll see you tomorrow with Morgan Bussey at 1 Pacific, 4 Eastern time. And hope you have a great day. Enjoy that sunshine. And in the meantime, if you're able, keep your distance and be safe.